Good day. The sound you can hear is a Geiger counter, and I'm Chris Busby. In a further video I will be talking to you about the Geiger counter, but the Geiger counter measures radiation, and radiation causes cancer. There will be some sort of nuclear war soon, and so you need to have a Geiger counter and you need to know how to use it. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to make a series of educational presentations on video about public health matters and scientific dishonesty, because in the world now we have a lot of scientific dishonesty relating to people's exposure to a whole range of really very nasty things that make money for powerful people. This includes mobile phone radiation, it includes contamination of the environment, but most of all, and the most important of all of these, is radioactivity. The world has been contaminated with radioactivity ever since the first atom bombs were exploded in the 1940s, and particularly the explosions at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which caused cancer in the people who were exposed at the time to the initial radiation, and also to the fallout of the black rain, which is composed of uranium particles. What I want to talk about is the relationship between radiation and cancer, because in the world at the moment people live near nuclear power stations, they eat foods that are contaminated with radioactive substances that never existed on Earth prior to 1945, and these substances cause cancer. But the radiation risk model, which governments use in order to regulate exposures, this model is a model that was set up shortly after the Second World War, and it's a dishonest model. And ever since Chernobyl, increasingly it's been shown to be a dishonest model, and the increases in cancer that we've seen from about 1980 onwards have been mainly a consequence of the exposure that people get from radiation contamination from radionuclides in the environment from nuclear weapons testing. We can show this. It's easy to prove epidemiologically by looking at populations and measuring cancers and looking at exposure. People who live in contaminated areas contaminated from Chernobyl, for example, there's an enormous amount of evidence that shows this to be the case. And not only cancer, but also congenital malformations, and for the human race perhaps the most important thing is loss of fertility. So I'm going to say a few words about this in this presentation and also in future presentations, because I can't cram it all into one presentation. But what I want to say here is about the risk model. The risk model tells you how many cancers you get for an exposure of so many dose units, right? The dose units at the moment are called millisieverts. In America they're called rems or millirems. And the dose model is very simple. They just add up all of the millirems or millisieverts that you're exposed to, and they put it on a graph and they see how many cancers that it's likely to produce. And as a result of the risk model that is currently there, of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, you will see that you have to have an enormous dose in order to get any cancer at all. The model was set up fundamentally to cover the back of the development of nuclear weapons, and of course nuclear engines for ships and submarines, and then also of course depleted uranium, which has been used significantly around the world since the 1990s, especially in Iraq, where I've studied the effects of this depleted uranium, also in Kosovo, and currently also in a new weapon, which I shall make another video about, in Palestine. and in Lebanon, in Gaza. But anyway, back to the point of this. The point of this is to introduce the European Committee on Radiation Risk. This is the risk model of the International Commission on Radiological Protection. This is the latest version of this, and it was published in 2007. So that's a long time ago. It hasn't fundamentally altered since the 1990 version of this. And the model permits the continued development of nuclear power, small modular reactors, the engines that drive submarines, and more or less the same ones, and of course the nuclear renaissance, where we're told that we can have nuclear power and it will save us all in terms of our energy needs. Of course it may well do that, but the downstream effects of it will be more cancer and more infertility. This model is dishonest and it's wrong. And in 1998, I joined with some eminent scientists, Rosalie Bertell, Professor Alice Stewart, Professor Alexei Yablokov of the Russian Academy of Science, Professor Inga Schmitz-Feuerhake of the University of Bremen, and ultimately about 40 or 50 other independent scientists who joined in to help create a new model, one that gave the right answer. Of course, the old model said that there could be no cancer fallout from Chernobyl, and so whenever there was cancer fallout from Chernobyl reported, and I was in Kiev in 2000 talking to the doctors there who were finding all these increases in cancer and leukemia, that information was just suppressed, and it's still being suppressed. If you write a paper now, as I did, about the increases in childhood leukemia in Scotland and Wales, tiny amounts of radiation, it got rejected by the referees of 2 or 3 different journals for no good reason, absolute nonsense reasons. Anyway, back to the ECRR. The European Committee on Radiation Risk was founded in Brussels in 1998, and by 2003 it had created a new risk model, one that accurately calculated the cancer effects following exposure to internal radiation. And in around about 2007 there were various papers about the health effects of Chernobyl, and these were all in line with the predictions of the European Committee on Radiation Risk and not in line with the predictions of the ICRP. So by the 2003 edition of the ECRR report, this is the 2010 edition of the ECR report, okay, this one. It has tables and calculations showing how to work out how many cancers you'll get and how much congenital malformations you'll get from a particular exposure to external and internal radiation. But this is out of date now as well. The 2007 ICRP model is complete madness. It doesn't tell you anything about the real world. People are dying all over the place, children have got leukemia near nuclear power stations, all this stuff. The ICRP does not predict any of it. The ECRR predicts it. But what has happened in the last 15 years, 10 or 15 years, is we've discovered that the basis for the ICRP risk model, which is the cancer yield of the Hiroshima lifespan study, this is the study that's at the basis of the risk model, that was dishonestly manipulated. And I wrote a letter like this about this to the quite senior, quite important, famous first-class journal Genetics in 2016, when I was working for the nuclear test veterans in the Royal Courts of Justice. And I pointed out that actually most of the cancers that were caused for the low-dose group, that's up to about 100 millisieverts, in the Hiroshima lifespan study were not caused by the gamma ray flash at all, or by the neutrons, or by the X-ray, by the instantaneous exposures to X-rays they were caused by exposure to the particles of uranium that were produced by the detonation of the atomic bomb, which turned all of the uranium from the casing into a plasma, and these little particles that were produced when the plasma condensed came down in rain, which was called black rain. And the black rain was what caused the cancers. And in fact, very recently, a couple of years ago, there was a court case in Japan in which the people who were exposed to the black rain were asking for compensation on the basis that their cancer was caused by the black rain, not by the radiation. They were too far away from the radiation. Their dose from the X-rays and the gamma rays and the neutrons was 0, but they all had cancer. And so they fought this out in the court, and they won. So the Japanese government has implicitly accepted that the ICRP risk model is a load of nonsense. This wasn't widely reported, incidentally, like a lot of things that are very important to you and me and to the human race, and indeed to all life on the planet. They're not reported. What you get in the news now is nonsense. And the time has come to go around the news and start and to actually take the science directly to the people, because the science is not difficult, you know. You don't have to be a scientist to understand the science. Maybe you need to know a bit of statistics, but if you look at the pictures, very often you see that something has happened and you don't need statistics. But this kind of science, if you like to call it rebel science, I don't know, chainsaw science, independent science, natural philosophy. I like to call it natural philosophy myself, because science now has become just prostituted to industry. And if you blow the whistle on anything, you just get sacked. Of course, I'm too old for them to sack me. In fact, I never really worked for anyone at the level where they could sack me. And sometimes they did sack me. I got thrown out of a number of universities. But then I don't care, you see. I'm interested, as scientists should be, in the truth. What's going on? Anyway, as far as radiation and health is concerned, we know what's going on, and I can tell you about this in various videos that I'm going to make. So anyway, after 2003, we published the first of the ECRR reports, and it went all over the place. It was translated into Japanese, it was translated into Russian and into Spanish and French. I don't think it's translated into German, but perhaps it was. Anyway, it got widely read. But of course it was suppressed by the nuclear industry and the journals that they fund, I suppose you would call. Control is the right answer, that they control. So by 2016 there was sufficient evidence published, including my letter to Genetics, that the basis for the ICRP risk model was wrong. But listen, the thing is that people are still being exposed to radiation on the basis that the ICRP risk model is right. In Europe you have a law called the Basic Safety Standards Directive that is completely based on the ICRP risk model, and if you try and tell them that it's wrong, they just ignore you. In fact, they have a law built in. We managed, the Greens in the European Parliament, then managed to get the European Commission to build this clause into that law to say that if some new evidence emerged that their risk model was a load of nonsense, they had to do something about it. But I've spent several years trying to get people, or not trying to get, but getting people to write to the people who regulate radioactivity in various countries, in Germany, in Denmark, in France, in Sweden. I even went into Sweden and knocked on the door of the people who regulate it, but they said, no, we're not going to do anything. And we have to wait for the ICRP to do something, but the ICRP don't do anything. The ICRP were chased out of Sweden, and they're now in Canada, and they're really very second-class scientists, I can tell you. They don't really do anything. They just write a load of nonsense, and that's the basis for the regulation. Okay, so fast forward to now. We need to deal with this ICRP risk model, and the only way to do it is to go around go around the institutions and take our own institution directly to the public and to the regulators. And the way to do this is we need to have a new risk model. This one has to be renewed. It's 2010, it's too old. And since it was written, a huge amount of evidence has been published, including evidence by me, incidentally, that the basis for the ICRP risk model is total nonsense. And in fact, only a few months ago, there was an enormous study of nuclear workers called In Works. And they published information to show clearly that the ICRP risk model was wrong. This was in the British Medical Journal. I wrote to the British Medical Journal and I pointed this out. And they published my letter online, since it's disappeared since then. But the people who wrote the paper, In Works, Dave Richardson and a whole load of other people who are like at the centre of support for the ICRP, these people, they actually responded to my letter. And in their response they said, yes, Busby's right, it does need to be looked at. So the tower of protection for the nuclear military complex is crumbling, but very slowly. So we need to kick the door down, if that's a sufficiently Buddhist metaphor. We need to do something about it, and what we have to do about it is I have to write the new ECR part, or organise writing the new ECRR 2024 or 2025 report and publish it as a book and then present it to the world. That has to happen. There's very likely a nuclear war coming, incidentally. There are new types of nuclear weapon, and I'll talk about these in another video, which this is the first of a series of videos in which I'm going to bring this stuff to the public rather than trying to publish it in the literature. This new weapon is being used by the Israelis in Gaza, but it turns out that it was also used by the Israelis in Gaza in 2014 and 2009, and it was used in Lebanon in 2006, it was used in Fallujah in 2003, it was used in the Balkans, and it leaves behind enriched uranium particles. I measured the enriched uranium, and other people have now measured it and published it in the literature. So I have to say a thing about that. But the point about that is that a limited nuclear war is now possible. So everybody's freaking out about the nuclear war that's going to come. And I believe it will. I believe there will be nuclear exchanges. You can't build all these things and not use them. This is just how it works. And at the moment, the United States in particular is suffering from all sorts of economic problems that would be resolved by a war. And so I think it's quite possible that there will be some nuclear exchanges, particularly in Europe, but possibly in America also. All the way up to a major nuclear exchange, you know, like all the missiles from Russia and all the missiles from the United States. But I have to say that that's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be pretty horrible, and tens of millions of people will die. But actually the kill radius of a modern nuclear weapon is not that big, okay, in terms of the radius, in terms of the area of the world. I've calculated that the area of, if you like, the kill radius of the total number of Russian missiles landing on America, 20% of the total number of all of the Russian missiles they have ready to fire now landed on America, 20% of them, it would have a kill radius of about 0.4% of the United States landmass. So if you don't happen to be living in a city, or if you live outside the city 25 miles away or something like that, you can survive. Because the major radiation blast the major radiation gamma ray fallout effect will disappear inside 3 weeks. So if you can hide away from the environment for 3 weeks, for that you need a Geiger counter, incidentally, so I'm going to make another video about that too. So why have I made this presentation? The reason I've made this presentation is I would like you to understand that the risk model that currently exists to protect you from radiation is wildly incorrect. And it's only there because the nuclear military complex need to have it there in order to continue to function and to continue to frighten everybody and to talk about nuclear winter and all of these unlikely scenarios. There are some quite likely scenarios, and they're not good. But you need to know about radiation and how to protect yourself from it. And in particular, we need to put pressure on governments by producing a risk model in a book which is accurate. And I happen to naively believe that the truth always wins in the end, that you cannot keep operating a dishonest system. And the beauty of the internet is that we can go around the dishonest system. We can laugh at the newspapers that talk nonsense, and we can form a kind of human race, if you like, alternative, human scientific alternative to the lies and dishonesty that are promulgated by these people. So thank you for listening, and you can see my stuff, or you can help to support. You can help to support this operation. There's a donate button on my website www.greenorbit.org. You can press the donate button and send some money, which will be used to create the new version of the ECRO report. And in this version we will lay out the true consequences of exposure to radiation, and we can lay out the proof that that is so as well. And that will be a powerful thing to do. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in a new video which I shall make about the Geiger counter and how to protect yourself in a limited nuclear exchange. Of course, if you're sitting under the bomb, that's the end of that. But if you're not too close, you can survive.